Alrighty, you made it. Welcome back. So this is the first of my sort of content deep dives where I dive into the chapters of Walden by Henry David Thoreau. This first chapter is called Economy. It's the first chapter of the whole work. It sets up the project, and I think it's an important and vital first step in the journey that we're going on today. So to give you a little context, if this is the first video you're watching, this is part of a longer series on Walden where I reflect on my own experience and why I like Walden, why it means a lot to me. So if you haven't watched the first video, you can go jump to it. If you haven't taken a look at the PDF yet, I have a PDF where I have all the important passages from this chapter, and I'll be referencing them throughout this today. So without further ado, let's jump right into the meat of today's discussion about Economy by Henry David Thoreau. I want to start off and sort of orient this discussion first about the things that Thoreau cares about, the things that matter to him, and then I'll talk about the things that don't matter to him in society, the things that he sees as hindrances to these first core principles of what matters in his view of the world. The first thing I'll sort of focus on is this is experience and how Thoreau thinks that sort of experience and your personal perspective is really central and tied to what you can know about the world. And so he says, you are in control of your destiny, you are in control of your experience, and experience is what matters. And there's a quote that I'll bring up now. He says, when he talks about students, he says, "I mean that they should not play life or study it merely, while the community supports them at this expensive game, but earnestly live it from beginning to end. How could youths better learn to live than by at once trying the experiment of living?" And so when he's talking about students, he brings up how expensive tuition is, and he talks about how the true value, what is an education, is the experience. And by removing it, by putting in textbooks, by having these wise professors perhaps like profess their knowledge and teach the students, it's far less beneficial than it is for some student to experience. And he talks about his own degree in navigation and how instead of learning navigation through textbooks, actually learning navigation out in the wild is where he would learn the most. And this ties back to his project in general. I mean, he's going to the woods because he wants to experiment with life and learn what it has to teach him. And so this experiment he embodies, and he also ties to the experience of students. Another quote that ties to this idea of experience is when he's talking about the value of sort of building one's own home as he does in Walden. He says, "Who knows but if men constructed their dwellings with their own hands and provided food for themselves and families simply and honestly enough, the poetic faculty would be universally developed as birds universally sing when they are so engaged. But alas, we do like cowbirds and cuckoos, which lay their eggs in nests which other birds have built, and cheer no traveler with their chattering and unmusical notes." So what he's talking about here, right, is the value that you can derive from building your own your own home. And I think this brings up the fact how when we're removed from the things that we enjoy, like perhaps maybe cooking is a good example of when you only go to restaurants and have others prepare food for you. The experience of cooking can be much more enjoyable, and you are not being distanced from what you are enjoying. If you build your own house, you enjoy it, and you also know all the parts that contributed to it, just like when you're cooking a nice meal. And he makes the comparison to these birds here, how the birds who sing the most beautiful songs are the ones who've made their own nests. And this, of course, is a metaphor about the people who understand this sort of core central question about ourselves: where are we going to live? It's these people who can sing the best songs as birds in our society. As he sort of situates himself, he's learning these things, and then he's sort of professing what he's learned. So he's creating this dichotomy, right, between these birds that sing well, that are in touch with the world around them, and then these birds that sing unmusical notes that are laying their eggs in the nest that other birds have built. So it's this metaphor here. So that was talking a bit about experience. And the second thing, the second sort of value that really matters a lot to Thoreau is freedom. And let me bring up first a quote that I think really gets at this. He says, "I see young men, my townsmen, whose misfortune it is to have inherited farms, houses, barns, cattle, and farming tools, for these are more easily acquired then gotten rid of. So he's talking about this thing that you would perceive to be good. Oh, you inherit something. You have this thing that has value in your life, but he's bringing up that sometimes having more things is more of a burden to our freedom, the ability to travel, the ability to do whatever you want. He also means it related to work. Maybe you have a job that you're spending a lot of your time working. This is a sacrifice. This is a debt that you sort of have and that you pay because of social obligation or because of your obligations to your family. And sometimes these things are more easily acquired than they are gotten rid of, as he says so well. And another quote that I'll bring up that talks about this, he talks about the example of these two people that want to go traveling, and one person has this plan to sort of make money while they are traveling, and the other person has this idea that they want to go and they bring their money with them, but they first want to make enough money so then they can travel. And he says that the person who is going to make money as they travel, they will have already started. They will be off in the races experiencing the life that they want to live, while this first person that is accumulating to wait for this travel, that person is wasting time when they could be out exploring like the first person. And this is an ideology that we think we hear a lot or think about a lot. Like for me in the working world, it's like, oh, I'm going to take this big vacation. I'm going to save up and I'm going to do this sort of mini vacation in between professions at some point in your life. Oh, I want to be on a beach somewhere. I want to be on an island somewhere. And I guess what Thoreau is saying is that this ideology of waiting for the future is not as beneficial, or people don't realize the range of opportunity that's available if you're just willing to take the jump. And another example he brings up is someone that says, he tells Thoreau, oh, I would live like you. I would build my own house. I would grow all my own food if I only had the means. And Thoreau pushes back on this by saying, that this person does have the means. He strictly details all that it costs for him to live. He only drinks water. He only grows his own food. It's very, very, very cheap. And by this, he makes it known how accessible his life is. So this thing of not having the means to do what he's doing, he makes it as accessible as possible, saying that this is something that we all can do, but we choose not to because of the course of life or because of these things that we perceive as expectations or obligations. And now onto the things that Thoreau says that don't matter, these things that we know deep down don't matter, but Thoreau speaks so clearly. These things like luxuries and material goods and other people's opinions. And he has some really beautiful quotes that I've included in the PDF there, like one of which is like, most of these luxuries and many of the so-called comforts of life are not only indispensable, but positive hindrances to the elevation of mankind. So it's not only that these things that you want are that you don't need them. It's actually that by getting them, they're actually making your life worse. They are distracting from what we see as the core value of experience and the core value of living that he's talking about. And he really gets at this. There's a beautiful passage where he's talking about clothing, and particularly this distinction of old versus new clothing. And he says, if you have any enterprise before you, try it in your old clothes. All men want not something to do with, but something to do, or rather something to be. Perhaps we should never procure a new suit, however ragged or dirty the old, until we have so conducted, so enterprised or sailed in some way that we feel like new men in the old. So by this, he puts the pressure on us to have this sort of self-reflection, to be able to be in touch with ourselves and to understand that by putting on new masks, putting on new masks metaphorically, putting on new clothes, we are not changing what is our core. So this question of what are the things that matter in life? Is it the clothes? Is it the luxuries? Is it the new stuff? Or is it the value? Is it the experience that you're living? Is it the knowledge you have? Is it the way you feel about something? I think this question and the way that Thoreau orients this dichotomy is really helpful and feels helpful for me. And it's a little dialogue that goes in my head when I feel the impulses of consumption, when I want to get the new Apple Watch or get the AirPods, when I want to get these things, the nicer flat in the nicest part of town. When you want these things, I feel regrounded by this discussion or this philosophy that's saying that there are things that matter much more. And when you say it as simply as that, it makes you feel more connected to it. It makes me feel like there's a reality right in front that you often miss, that's disguised behind the new clothes, that's disguised behind all the new things that can make your life better in XYZ way. Bringing back this idea of experience, it relates to freedom, and it relates to you having agency. Part of having freedom is having the choice to be able to, in his case, recede from society and build his own house. But in our case, or it feels like in my case, this ultimate and amazing freedom that we have, if we're younger, I have so much time to be able to move to a different country without my family to support or bring with me. I feel like I have this ultimate freedom, this choice that he is talking about, and is also central to what he does in his project. Life is an experiment. We have the choice to make it the way we want to make it. And I think that idea is something powerful, and it's something I keep with me. So to recap, we talk about freedom here, we talk about experience here, and why those matter to Thoreau. We also talk about material things, luxuries, new clothes, and how these things don't matter, how they are distracting or perhaps hindrances to the things that matter the most in life. And so now I'm going to sort of transition to our next chapter, which is called Where I Lived and What I Live For, with the most iconic passage from Walden, and that we're going to jump into in the next video. There's a lot of good stuff there, more ideas like this one, and I'll see you there.